This is also bad news if you own like the GoPro Hero 11, GoPro Hero 12. The GoPro Hero 13 specs have finally leaked online due to some photos of the box. Forget about the 1-inch sensor. GoPro have dropped some wild surprises instead. Let's dive into all the details. Bad news first, there is no 1-inch sensor. Now, I'm basing this opinion off of the box. Obviously, if there was a 1-inch sensor in the GoPro, you would think that this would be all over the box. It's not. That's not to say they haven't changed the actual sensor. Some speculation online is saying that they've just upgraded the actual sensor, but not a 1-inch sensor. It's just a newer version of the sensor that's already in the GoPro Hero 12. Resolution-wise, it is still 5.3K 60 and 4K 120. There is no surprises there. That was always going to remain. I think a lot of folks were hoping for 6K, but no, it is 5.3K, or there's no 8K either, but 5.3K is what we have. Now, that's great, right? For most folks, they will never need to use it, but it's good to have that resolution. However, there is one significant change to one of the shooting modes in video on the GoPro Hero 13. If we look at this box again, it's going to shoot something called HLG HDR video. HDR video was introduced in the last GoPro. It just made your images and video look a lot better, better contrast, better shadows and highlights. Now it's HLG HDR. What does that mean? I'm sure for most folks, you probably don't care less, but basically it's true HDR video, which is great if you know what to do with it. If you know how to edit it, if you know how to color grade it, if you know how to render it out so it'll show up as proper HDR on YouTube. Great feature to have, but I don't know anybody really asks for it or really needed it. There is no GP3 chip. Now, this again would be plastered all over the box if it had a brand new chip. However, given what I've just said about HLG HDR video, I'm kind of thinking maybe they have done something with the actual GP2 chip, which is only a couple of iterations old. Maybe they've squeezed a little bit more out of that, and some of the features I'm going to talk about would actually validate this theory. Some of the other specs that are leaking is that it'll upload to the cloud automatically and it'll generate a video clip, and then that can be waiting on your desktop. Yeah, no, I'm just not really that interested in that kind of thing, but it's a feature that I'm sure somebody somewhere will probably use at least once. You can also expect time-lapse with Time Warp 3.0. GoPros are great for time lapses, especially Time Warp 3.0. There's insane stabilization. So your time lapses or motion lapses or hyper lapses will look incredibly good with this actual function. The GoPro Hero 13 will have 10-bit color. No, that's not it. The last one had 10-bit color. 10-bit color is great. Again, if you know what you're doing with it and you grade your videos, 10-bit color is in the billions of colors versus the millions of colors when it comes to 8-bit color. But look, we're not getting into a science lesson here. It'll have enhanced audio, whatever that means. I guess maybe directional audio on the mic, or the audio might be better. Yeah, whatever. Now, this is where it starts getting really, really interesting. GoPro are making their own ND filters. Traditionally, ND filters for the GoPro series have always been made by the likes of Freewell or Polar Pro, and they've always made exceptionally good ND filters. Now, ND filters bring a whole heap of problems to GoPro action cameras that I talk about towards the end of the video. So if you want to know about that, stick around. But besides the ND filters, which to be fair, they're native, they're made by GoPro, they look really, really cool. They kind of form the proper aesthetic up top, that grill that's on the GoPro Hero 13. But now, these other things that they're doing. This might lead me to believe this is why the GP2 chip is getting some extra juice, possibly. And this was also one of the reasons where a lot of people thought that the actual GoPro Hero 13 would have a 1-inch sensor. We've already known that there's an ultra-wide lens adapter coming. It's 177 degrees of field of view, which is more or less the same as the GoPro Max 2 one, or whichever GoPro Max, the big one anyway. Same field of view. I wonder is it just the same lens, but I gotta say it looks pretty beefy and it looks pretty cool. But they're also now doing a macro lens. So basically a macro lens means you can get super close to your subject and it's not going to kind of blur out or lose any detail. It's going to get insanely close. Now this macro lens on the GoPro Hero 13, well, it's apparently, take this for what it's worth, it's going to enable manual focus on the GoPro Hero 13, so you can get up to about 4 times closer to your subject than you normally could. Manual focus on the GoPro. That sounds pretty good because, let's face it, up until now on a GoPro, everything has always been in focus unless you rammed your nose right up to it. Something else that's promised as part of these new lenses, kind of deciphering what's on the actual box, is they're going to detect automatically which lens mod is on the actual GoPro Hero 13. So it's a pretty cool thing that it's going to know that it's the macro lens, the wide angle lens, or this other lens that I'm going to get into, and nobody envisioned this in a month of Sundays ever happening. But before I get to that, something else that is absolutely huge on the GoPro, but this is also bad news if you own like the GoPro Hero 11, GoPro Hero 12, if you've got a whole bunch of GoPro batteries, this could be a killer. GoPro, apparently, looking at the specs online, have actually made a slightly bigger battery. Now, the theory here is that the grill that's on the front of the GoPro Hero 13 is actually stretching the GoPro up a little bit, and the batteries do look a little bit different. Apparently, the new Enduro batteries will be 1900 milliamp hours versus the Enduro batteries that exist currently in lots of GoPro houses at 1720 milliamp hours. So there's a little bit of an increase in juice. Now, what does this mean for recording times? It's pretty cool. If you shoot 1080p 30, then you are going to get a whopping 13 hours. And if you shoot a 5.3K 60 or 4K 60, stuff like that, you're going to get 1.5 to 2 hours. That's a pretty significant increase, and it's good to know that if the batteries are changing, then that's what you're going to get. However, as I said, does that mean your existing batteries will not work with the new GoPro Hero 13 if you decide to upgrade? There's also a new dual charger, which leads me to believe there is this change in the batteries, unless they're just tying it in to make the whole look aesthetic and consistent. But something to keep in mind. I'm not sure what these leaked GoPro box photos were shot on besides badly gone off potato. But if you look at the box here, there's apparently 13x slow motion at 720p. Which is absolutely, roughly, I think we're working it out to be about 320 frames per second, which is bonkers. I know it's 720p, but having that slow motion could be really useful. All right, I'm going to put everybody out of their misery. Onto the thing, and I've built this up enough, onto the thing that nobody saw coming ever. And I'll be honest, this has got me really excited about the GoPro Hero 13. GoPro have decided that besides the ultra-wide lens, the macro lens, the ND filters that they're actually building themselves, they are releasing an anamorphic lens for the GoPro Hero 13. This is on the box, it's everywhere, so this is actually happening. Traditionally, you had to kind of jerry-rig your own little anamorphic lens out there. They were never amazing. They were always kind of awkward to fit, but now this is a custom-made one. I'm not sure how anamorphic lens fits into action sports, but an anamorphic lens is something that's very wide, and it will give those kind of blue cinematic flares. Sometimes it's gold flares. If you've seen any J.J. Abrams movies, he shoots everything on anamorphic, so all of those blue flares, that could be really cool. No idea how much any of these lenses are going to cost. I know even the cheapest anamorphic lens these days for your phone could be up to nearly $100. I'm guessing it'll probably be around that. But on the box, on this low-res photo, you can see the anamorphic lens. This is a super cool thing. I'd hazard a guess it probably won't be ready for launch. I hope it is. But yeah, the anamorphic lens could be an absolute huge big deal for the GoPro Hero 13. Jumping back to these lenses, I mentioned ND filters. Now, ND filters pose great functionality because they can get that cinematic motion blur. You know, that blur that you see in movies and TV. Yeah, anyway, right? That cinematic motion blur has to be shot at 1/50 frame rate. The only way you can do that is by using an ND filter. When you put an ND filter onto a GoPro and you put it into manual shutter mode, it affects the stabilization, because the stabilization in the GoPro Hero 13 and all of the GoPros is electronic. So it's an algorithm that needs to see as much of the screen as possible, and then it stabilizes it on the fly. It's hyper smooth. It works incredibly well. Like, GoPros are gimbal killers, but as soon as you put ND filters on for that cinematic vibe, it can cause a lot of problems with the stabilization because the image is a little bit darker. It can't see that. It's a problem. So it'd be interesting to see how they're going to work around that. Better low light performance would certainly help in that scenario. And now that I'm thinking about those ND filters, that anamorphic lens, are these ND filters actually stackable? So you got your anamorphic lens, you want to make something cinematic with your GoPro, and then I want that cinematic mode. I can't put the ND filter onto the anamorphic lens. GoPro, have you thought of that? Speaking of thoughts, have you considered subscribing to this channel? If you want to make better decisions about the cameras that you're buying and how to use them, subscribe. This video also. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Why did you just go so cheesy? There's nobody there.